Why optimists live longer. Here is a question worth sitting with for a moment. If someone told you there was something you could do, no medication, no surgery, no expensive intervention, that would reduce your risk of dying from any cause by 13 to 14%, cut your risk of cardiovascular disease by more than a third, and potentially add years to your life, you would want to know what it was. The answer, according to decades of rigorous scientific research, is optimism. Not toxic positivity, not pretending life is perfect, not ignoring hardship or painting over struggle with a forced smile. Real, genuine optimism. A general expectation that things will work out. A quiet, underlying belief that the future holds good things. And the data behind what this single psychological trait does to the human body is, frankly, extraordinary. Let's start with the numbers, because they are hard to ignore. Researchers from Harvard and Boston University conducted one of the largest studies on this question ever attempted, analyzing data from nearly 70,000 women and over 1,400 men tracked over decades. The results showed that optimists tend to live on average 11 to 15% longer than pessimists and have an excellent chance of achieving exceptional longevity, defined as living beyond 85 years. A separate study published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society, analyzing data from over 150,000 women across diverse racial and ethnic backgrounds, found that the most optimistic participants were likely to have a 5.4% longer lifespan and a 10% greater likelihood of living beyond 90 years than the least optimistic. In a pooled meta-analysis drawing on 6 studies, and over 180,000 participants found that optimistic individuals showed a 13% lower risk of all-cause mortality and a 41% lower risk of developing cardiovascular disease compared to those with lower optimism levels. These are not small effects. These are numbers that rival the impact of well-known health interventions. And crucially, they held up after researchers controlled for diet, exercise, existing health conditions, and depression. The optimism effect was real, independent, and significant. So the obvious question is, why? What is actually happening inside the body of an optimist that isn't happening inside the body of a pessimist? And this is where the science gets genuinely fascinating. It comes down to stress, specifically how optimists and pessimists experience it differently at a biological level. When you face a challenge and your brain interprets it as threatening, as something likely to go badly, your body activates the stress response. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis fires up, flooding your system with cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart rate rises. Your blood pressure climbs. Your immune system gets suppressed. In the short term, this is useful. It gets you ready to act. But when this response is chronic, when your baseline interpretation of the future is that things are likely to go wrong, the body pays a steep and accumulating price. Elevated stress hormones like cortisol and noradrenaline lead to chronic inflammation and increase the risk of heart disease over time. Optimistic individuals, by modulating their stress responses, experience lower levels of circulating cortisol and reduced sympathetic nervous system activation, which contributes to a cascade of positive physiological effects, including improved cardiovascular health, enhanced immune function, and a reduced risk of stress-related disorders. In other words, the optimist's body is running at a lower baseline level of biological threat. Day after day, year after year, decade after decade, that difference accumulates into measurably longer, healthier life. The immune system tells an equally compelling story. A review of more than 80 studies found that optimism had a significant impact across multiple health domains, including overall longevity, survival from disease, heart health, immunity, cancer outcomes, pregnancy outcomes, and pain tolerance. One study tracked law students through the extreme stress of their first semester and found that optimism was associated with better mood and higher counts of helper T cells, the immune cells that coordinate the body's entire defense response. Another study found that during acute psychological stress, optimists mounted a significantly less excessive inflammatory response, producing lower levels of interleukin-6, an inflammatory marker linked to cardiovascular disease, arthritis, and certain cancers. Optimistic individuals experience reduced inflammation markers and lower cortisol levels, allowing their immune system to operate at peak efficiency, with improved responses to vaccines and faster healing from injuries. Your outlook, it turns out, is not just a psychological state. It is an instruction to your immune system. Now here is the piece of this story that may matter most. Because it would be easy to hear all of this and conclude, well, some people are just born optimistic, and some people aren't. Some people are wired for it, and some are not. And that's just the hand you were dealt. But the research says something completely different. Optimism is not a fixed trait. It is a trainable skill. Martin Seligman, one of the founders of positive psychology, built an entire evidence-based framework around this idea, called learned optimism, demonstrating that the way people explain events to themselves can be deliberately retrained, with measurable effects on both psychological and physical well-being. And a meta-analysis of 29 studies confirmed that psychological interventions can meaningfully increase dispositional optimism, with the strongest effect achieved through the best possible self method. The best possible self exercise, developed by researcher Laura King, is beautifully simple. You write, in detail, about your life in the future, after everything has gone as well as it possibly could. Your relationships, your work, your health, your finances. The version of you who has grown into everything you hoped for. The exercise has been shown to boost positive emotions, happiness levels, optimism and hope, improve coping skills, and elevate positive expectations about the future. Just 5 minutes a day of this practice, sustained over 2 weeks, produced significant measurable increases in optimism compared to control groups. Not as a one-off mood boost, as a genuine shift in how people expected the future to unfold. So let's bring this together into something you can actually use. The research is not telling you to pretend everything is fine. It is not asking you to deny difficulty, avoid hard truths, or manufacture cheerfulness you don't feel. What it is telling you is this: the story you tell yourself about the future, whether good things are likely or unlikely, whether things will work out or won't, whether you have agency over your outcomes or you don't, is not just a thought floating in your head. It is a biological instruction. One that your cardiovascular system, your immune system, your stress hormones, and your cellular repair processes are all quietly following. Every single day, optimism is not just a mindset. It creates measurable changes in your body. Optimistic people tend to have lower levels of inflammation, healthier cholesterol, lower blood pressure, and stronger immune function. And the extraordinary finding, the one that changes everything, is that you can choose to cultivate it through the stories you practice, through the futures you imagine, through the daily, deliberate decision to expect that things can and will go well. Optimists don't live longer because life handed them an easier path. They live longer because the path they walk, the same difficult, uncertain, unpredictable human path the rest of us walk, is being navigated by a nervous system that has been taught to expect good things. And that expectation, it turns out, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy written not just in the mind, but in the body. The biology is clear. Hope is not soft. Hope is survival. Are you an optimist? Comment below. Like, comment, and subscribe for more.